Hey, it's Mirella Manelli, and today I'm going to show you how I do a Platinum Card Babylight on natural level 4 hair, and it's also going to include a base break color melt using all Kenra color. Now let's go ahead and get started.
This is my beautiful client, and as you can see, she's a natural level 4 on that root area, and she's got lots of orange patches, especially around that money piece area, and she also has a lot of harsh lines of demarcation. So traditionally she gets tons of back-to-back baby lights kind of going on. However, she's really looking to brighten up her base because she is so naturally dark. These lines of demarcation are very prominent, and she's also got some bleed marks that we gotta adjust, and she has a little bit of orange bands and strands throughout. So this is a little mini color correction, and the way we're gonna address this is by going in with a back-to-back baby light, or what I like to call a Platinum Card baby light. It's basically a full-on highlight with very little hair in between. So I'm just going to part her hair naturally down the center and then from the apex down behind the ear, separating the front from the back. And because she is really blonde, and anytime I'm doing foiling, I like to work from the bottom up. So I'm just going to split her hair right down the middle and work on each quadrant one at a time. For this project, I'm going to be using two different lighteners. So the first one I'm mixing up is Blue Powder Lightener at a 1:2 mixing ratio with 20 volume developer. And then my second lightener, which is going to be for those mids and ends, is Beyond Bond Lightener at a 1:2 mixing ratio with 20 volume developer. Now, the reason why I chose to use two different lighteners is because the blue powder is going to be my power lifter for that natural level 4 hair, and the Beyond Bond is going to be great for overlapping previously blonde hair, which you can tell she has lots of compromised ends. So that's why I got to be really careful in how I address this head of hair. To get her started, I'm going in with a traditional horizontal highlight using this Dreamweaver comb from Fremar, but if you don't have this comb, no big deal. I always get asked, do you need this comb? The truth is you do not. You can use a traditional weave style rat tail comb to weave out your pieces. This just makes the process go by so quickly for me. So what you're seeing here is I'm dividing this quadrant into another quadrant just to make it a little easier for me. And I realized that as I got started with this application, I'm going to need to move really quickly. So I'm actually going to create 4 quadrants in just this back section. So I'm going to work on this left quadrant on the bottom by the occipital, and then I'm going to move right on over to the right side on the occipital, so that way these two sections can process at the exact same time. So basically what you're seeing here is a horizontal back-to-back section with hardly any hair in between. All of these sections are going to be about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch wide, and I'm bringing this straight on down. Now keep in mind, this horizontal placement is essential for a true blend. And if you want to learn more about foil placements, be sure to check out my other hair tutorial called 4 Foil Placements and the Effects They Create. But if you're new to foil placement, just know that horizontal lines are going to create a lot of diffusion when doing a correction. So that's exactly what I'm trying to do with this head of hair, because we need lots of diffusion. Even though her orange bands are pretty subtle, I know that in order for me to break up these lines, I need to use this placement. Another added tip when doing this type of back-to-back Platinum Card baby light is, in addition to using the right lightener, you're also going to need to have a conditioner on hand. So what I'm using on the areas where it's super blonde and I just really don't need to pull through any lightener, that's where I'm adding in the Nourishing Masque from Kenra Professional. So that way it's going to add a protective barrier because I am using two different lighteners. So this is a really important little tidbit because a lot of people struggle with getting the foil and hair to stick and not move, and this is how you're going to get bleed marks. Nourishing Masque is a great placeholder for Lightener. So you can almost see here in this video exactly where my stopping point was. And now I'm working on the bottom right quadrant. And just to reiterate, this is so that way these bottom quadrants process at the same time, because more than likely, as soon as I'm done putting in all of these foils, this back section is going to be done, and it would be so much more easier and comfortable to remove this entire bottom section at the same time at the shampoo bowl. Something really important to note and that I forgot to film was prepping the hair with the proper products. So you can see she is really naturally dark, but also really blonde, which makes her hair a little bit more fragile to work with. And we're also dealing with a lot of uneven porosity. So I actually prepped her hair with Porosity Equalizing spray, which also caused her hair to start to curl up and frizz a little bit. So I want to make it really clear that when you're assessing the hair and people have a lot of natural texture, do not confuse that natural texture with damage or compromised hair. This simply means that she has naturally curly hair and it frizzes up really easily anytime moisture is involved. So when I went ahead and sprayed on that Porosity Equalizing spray, immediately her curls started to come right back up. So this is really important to pay attention to when you're assessing your client's hair during that consultation. So I'm going to finish up these back quadrants, still going in those horizontal sections, but overall you can get an idea of how much correcting we're doing here. I'm strategically placing that Beyond Bond Lightener exactly where it needs to be, as well as the Nourishing Masque, and then really focusing on blonding that top section so it all lifts nice and evenly. So once I get this back section done, I'm also going to periodically be checking these hairline highlights and this entire back section because I don't want it to over process, causing too much breakage. The overall goal is to fix these harsh lines of demarcation, break up this banding, fix these dark ribbons and orange ribbons, and get her to a nice globally beautiful shade of blonde that's also a little rooted with the base break that we're going to do. So right here on the very, very top, to just finish it off, I am going to transition my direction of how my foils are done. So since I was more horizontal in the back, I wanted to bring that horizontal section closer towards the top of her head. So this was really important for me to shift just because of how I wanted that blonding to fall right there on the crown. So again, just keep the direction in mind when you're doing a lot of these blonding techniques. As soon as I got the entire back section applied, I immediately went to the bottom just to check those hairline highlights, just because those are typically the most fragile. And yes, they are done. So right here, I'm just clipping that up and using this fancy little glove that's basically like a towel on your hand. This is actually going to wipe away all of the bleach and lightener excess, so that way it just kind of dries out. So I'm going through these just one by one, just checking to see which ones are done and where the stopping point is at. Again, making sure to be really, really careful. And I also will reapply sometimes if needed. But you can tell right here she doesn't have any breakage. It's looking really great. We already diffused a lot of these lines. However, I do go through these one at a time, and sometimes I will notice that there's not enough lift in certain areas. So that's where I'll just pack it right back up, and I know I need a little bit more time, and I'll put a separate timer on just so that way it reminds me to check back in. And then from there, I'm going to work towards the front. So I'm actually leaving the hairline out pretty heavy, and this is because she did tell me that she would love to somewhat have a money piece. Now, money pieces are really difficult to acquire if you don't have enough background, and we're not really adding a lot of background here, we're adding a lot of blonding. So what I told her was I will try my very best by adding in more slices towards that front area, and we're going to change the direction. So again, the direction of my foils is going to vary depending on the overall look that my client's trying to achieve. So still keeping these side sections very horizontal, doing the same exact application we did in the back, but that money piece is going to change up just a little bit. Something to remember about doing a technique like this is to mix up your lighteners in small batches. So me personally, I love measuring in grams. So I typically do about 20 grams per bowl to 40 grams of my developer. So by the time I get to this front section, I'm already needing to mix up a brand new batch. And the reason why I do this is so that way I can have a lot more control on the power and lift of my lightener. The longer it's sitting in the bowl, the longer it's sitting there oxidizing and basically losing its power over its time. So having a nice fresh batch of lightener is really the best strategy you can do for any type of highlighting or blonding service. Now, if you are wondering what that little orange patch of blonde is kind of going on towards the front of her hairline, I actually was wondering the same thing too. It was one of the first questions I asked her when she sat in my chair. And basically her honest answer was she wanted to create a money piece. So she decided to try to attempt to lighten her own hair right there in the front, and then quickly realized that she was making a mistake and went to go wash it off immediately. So that's why it's this interesting little blorange section right here in the front, and we're gonna go ahead and fix that for her. So right here for this money piece section, like I mentioned, we're gonna change the direction. We're gonna go more along with her hairline. So this is what's called a vertical placement. This is going to give me a ribbon effect because of the way that the hair lays right on down. So I'm just going to put in a few back-to-back slices right here for this hairline, and I'm going to do the same exact thing for the other side as well as that top section. Now, because this is the hairline and she had tons of blonding hair, I decided to just go in with the Beyond Bond lightener instead of the blue powder at all. Typically with an application like this, I normally would go in and weave out those really blonde pieces and separate them, but she just had a lot of correcting kind of going on. So this is where I kind of had to make an executive decision to just layer in that Beyond Bond throughout. But her hair did extremely well. Like I said, I just kind of kept an eye on it. She still has some little areas that need some fixing. So I decided to do one more little pass through just to do a little bit more blending. And that was doing a wet balayage. Now here I just mixed up a little bit more of that Beyond Bond lightener and processed it for another like 10 minutes just to kind of marry it all together. Now, overall, we got her pretty light and blended what we could in one session. This was a very long, tedious process, but I was really happy with the result, especially considering her hair was already pretty blonde. So right here, I'm just shampooing her out with a Luxe shampoo from Kenra Professional. I am not going to be using any conditioner for this process because I'm going to be doing a base break. So I decided to use Studio Stylist Express in 9A, 7A, and 8N and mix that up 1-to-1 with 20 volume developer. And then for the mids and ends, I'm going to be using Demi-Permanent in 8SM and 10B at a 1-to-2 mixing ratio with 9 volume developer. Now, the reason why I decided to go in with the Studio Stylist Express is so that way I could have a lot more control because she is a natural level 4 and it's going to provide me a lot more lift and brightening effect than what the base breakers could offer me. And overall, just again giving me a little bit more control with the application and blend that I'm looking for. I went ahead and applied that right onto the first inch of her roots and then immediately started combing it right on down for the blend into the Demi-Permanent. I left her money piece for last, and that's because it's the brightest and lightest piece to work on. And I tapped in the SSE right onto the root area about 1/4 of an inch deep and then immediately brushed that down and blended it into the 10B and 8SM blend and then processed her for just 10 minutes. Once she was done processing, I shampooed her out with Luxe shampoo and conditioner, also did a Nourishing mask treatment on her, and then layered in Pearl Detangler along with the Perfect Blowout. And then right before adding in some curls, I love the Silkening Heat Cream to layer on right before doing some Ironwork. It gives me the thermal protection that I need, and then also leaves the hair beautifully soft and combable, so that way she can still run her fingers through it. I added in a few curls, and then once I was done putting those in, I added my favorite texturizing taffy just to tame a little bit of the flyaways away. And here is the final result. The before and after really speaks for itself. Much more cooler effect, so much more blend going on. We had minimal breakage and damage to her hair. Overall, she loved it, and you can definitely tell there's a way better blend and softer line of demarcation right onto that root area. I'm so excited to see her on her blonde journey, because now we just get to touch up these highlights and then still do this base break with SSC and toner. So just to give you a little recap, I used Blue Powder Lightener and Beyond Bond for her baby lights, and then for her final color melt, I used Studio Stylist Express and blended that into Demi-Permanent. I used all Kenra products throughout this entire process using Luxe Shine shampoo and conditioner. Then I prepped her with the Pearl Detangler and gave her a voluminous blowout using the Perfect Blowout, and on dry hair the Silkening Heat Cream with some large barrel curls, and then finished her off with texturizing taffy just to keep those flyaways at bay.
So I really hoped you enjoyed this hair tutorial, and if you did, please give this video a thumbs up, make sure to subscribe, and be sure to check out my other hair tutorials right here on this channel, and I will see you in the next video.